So, as we said, today is our annual UUI poetry service. Tyler and Beth and Tyler have joined us on the stage, and we have decided that today we're just going to, instead of alternating, we're just going to read our poems. If there's a theme, you will have to discern it. So here's the poem I was going to read about my friend and ex-business partner who sent out a music video every Friday morning at 6 o'clock for 20 years. Joe wakes up early, always did. Friday morning's vid waiting for me. Sends me down the YouTube hole, looking around till I find the bottom. I see the glint of gems, brush them off as down I spin and down again. The drop can take minutes or hours, but the bottom always comes. It may look like gems I've passed till the dust comes off and the glint comes glow. Every Friday I take the trip to the glowing bottom of the YouTube hole. Smiling glint to glow, a tear perhaps, because I know Joe wakes up early. Always did. Friday morning's vids waiting for me. And I told Jay Harvey, who is a stalwart of our poets and of this poetry service, maybe one of the originators, who knows, that I was going to mention him today. Jay and I have an ongoing argument, and more I agree with Jay about this, about song lyrics being poems. And I do agree with him more and more, but I've always done some song lyrics as a poem. So even though I agree with Jay, I think that they mostly aren't. This is a poem by the famous poets Jerome J. Garcia and Robert Hunter. It must be getting early. Clocks are running late. Paint by numbers, morning sky looks so phony. Dawn is breaking everywhere. Light a candle, curse the glare. Draw the curtains, I don't care, 'cause it's all right. I will get by. I will survive. I see you got your list out. Say your piece and get out. Yes, I get the gist of it, but it's all right. Sorry that you feel that way. The only thing there is to say, every silver lining's got a touch of gray. I will get by. I will survive. It's a lesson to me, the Abels, the Bakers, and the C's, the ABCs we all must face, and try to keep a little grace. It's a lesson to me, the deltas and the east and the frees, the ABCs we all think of, and try to keep a little love. I know the rent is in arrears. The dog has not been fed for years. It's even worse than it appears, but it's all right. Cows are giving kerosene. The kid can't read at 17. The words he knows are all obscene, but it's all right. I will get by. I will survive. The shoe is on the hand it fits. There's really nothing much to it. Whistle through your teeth and spit, 'cause it's all right. Oh well, a touch of gray kind of suits you anyway. That was all I had to say, and it's all right. I will get by. I will survive. Here's a poem by a wonderful poet, Madeline Cravens. Not the pleasure of lovers, but the pleasure of letters, a pleasure like weather delayed and prepared for, not the pleasure of lessons, but the pleasure of errors, of nightmares, of actors in the black box of a theater, not the pleasure of present, but the pleasure of later, the pleasure of letters and weather and terror asleep by the lake, unable to answer, the pleasure of candles, their wax on the table, not the pleasure of saviors, but the pleasure of errors, not the pleasure of marriage, but the pleasure of failure, the pleasure of characters like family members, their failures and errors, their laughter and weather, the pleasure of water, terrible rivers, not the pleasure of empire, but the pleasure of after our failure to keep an accurate record, not the pleasure of tethers, but the pleasure of strangers, the terrible strangers who will become your lovers, not the pleasure of novels, but the pleasure of anger, your failure to answer all of my letters, the pleasure of daughters, the pleasure of daughters writing letters in April, the failure of orchards, the terror of mothers, not the pleasure of planners, but the pleasure of errors. And I dug out this poem I read in 2012. Carla and I are moving from a house where we've lived longer than any other house we've ever lived in. I can't remember how many years. We moved in the 90s. This is called A Walk Down Sycamore Hill. Our new place is going to be okay, but we'll miss our old place. A Walk Down Sycamore Hill from November 28th, 2012. After a tossing and turning night, thinking about trifling this or trifling that, I need an early morning walk down Sycamore Hill with the full moon lighting my way, the crisp stars twinkling their blissful tunes, my destination a newspaper wrapped in orange plastic at the end of the drive. Beth?
That's not going to work. Hi. These poems are ones that illustrate the tension that I love in poems. And so I loved what John said at the beginning about poems scratching an itch or causing you to itch. So hopefully that does that for you, and I'd love to hear about it if it does. The first one's Good Bones by Maggie Smith. Life is short, though I keep this from my children. Life is short, and I've shortened mine in 1,000 delicious, ill-advised ways. 1,000 deliciously ill-advised ways I'll keep from my children. The world is at least 50% terrible, and that's a conservative estimate, though I keep this from my children. For every bird, there is a stone thrown at a bird. For every loved child, a child broken, bagged, sunk in a lake. Life is short, and the world is at least half terrible, and for every stranger, there is one who would break you, though I keep this from my children. I'm trying to sell them the world. Any decent realtor walking through a real dump chirps on about Good Bones. This place could be beautiful, right? You can make this place beautiful. The Goddess Who Created This Passing World by Alice Notley. The goddess who created this passing world said, "Let there be light bulbs and liquefaction." Life spilled out onto the street. Colors whirled, cars and the variously shod feet were born, and the past and future and I born too. Light as airmail paper, she flew away to Annapurna or Mount McKinley or both, but instantly clarified, composed. Forever was I meant by her to recognize a painting as beautiful or a movie as stunning, and to adore the finitude of words and understand as surfaces my dreams. Know the eye, the organ of affection, and depths to be inflections of her voice and wrist and smile. The next one's Forsythia by Ada Limon, who's our poet laureate for the US. At the cabin in Snug Hollow near McSwain Beach Creek, just spring, all the animals are out, and my beloved and I are lying in bed in a soft silence. We are talking about how we carry so many people with us wherever we go, how even simple living, these unearned moments, are a tribute to the dead. We are both expecting to hear an owl as the night deepens. All afternoon, from the porch, we watched an eastern towhee furiously build her nest in the untamed Forsythia, with its yellow spilling out into the horizon. I told him that the way I remember the name Forsythia is that when my stepmother Cynthia was dying, that last week she said lucidly, but mysteriously, "More yellow." And I thought, yes, more yellow, and nodded, because I agreed. Of course, more yellow. And so now in my head, when I see that yellow tangle, I say, "For Cynthia, for Cynthia, Forsythia, Forsythia, more yellow." It is night now, and the owl never comes, only more of the night and what repeats in the night. And my last one is Ledge by Kevin Young. No use telling the dead what you've learned since. They've learned it too. How to go on without you, the mercy of mourning and of moving, the light that persists even if. Beauty is as beauty does, my mother says, who is beautiful and speaks loud so she can be understood, unlike poets who can't talk to save their lives, so they write. It's like a language loss, can be learned only by living there. What anchors us to this thirst and earth, its threats and thinness, its ways of waning and making the most of worse and much worse, if not this light lifting up over the ridge.
Hello. We're here. I've never been up here before. This is strange. It's very well labeled back here too. There's a label that says candle snuffers, which I really like. Anyways, I'm just gonna read 3 of my favorite poems. Simple enough. This is Reality by Dean Young. I don't know what people mean by reality. Is it the ocean, which I've always loved, no matter its chitinous claws, or the sky everything falls through, or those scary mites that live on our eyelids, or the rain of diamonds on Saturn? Whatever it is, I'm sure I've tried to avoid it ever since my teachers and ex-girlfriends threatened one day it would dawn on me in a way that made me think that dawn would just make everything darker. Now when I think of reality, I see one of those beige plastic covers over the hospital's main entry. We're surrounded by zinnias trying to sneak up on us, and an indeterminate rumbling fills the air. Here's my birth certificate. See if you can make sense of it. Cranes, Mafiosos, and a Polaroid Camera by Natalie Diaz. I had a few days left of my stay at the Crane Sanctuary in Kearney, Nebraska, when my brother called. It was 3:24 a.m. "It's me," he said. "It's your brother." He had taken apart another Polaroid camera and needed me to explain how to put it back together. His voice was a snare drum, knocking and quick. He was crying. I didn't want to wake the other visitors, and I knew he'd keep calling hour after hour, day after day, lifetime after miserable lifetime, until I answered. I slid out of bed. "Tell me what to do. You know what to do," he pleaded. I should know how to help my brother by now. He and I have had this exact conversation before. If I love him, if I really love him, why haven't I learned to reassemble a Polaroid camera? Instead, I told him about the Sandhill Cranes, the way they dance, moving into and giving way to one another, bowing down, cresting, and collapsing their wings, necks, and shoulders, silver curls of smoky rhythm. But he didn't believe me. My brother believes the mafia placed a transmitter deep within his Polaroid camera, but he can't believe in dancing cranes. "You think this is a joke?" he whispers. "These are mafiosos I'm talking about. You're probably next." He hung up on me. That dawn, I aimed my digital camera at the sky until the last of an island of late-rising cranes lifted into the metallic air. I couldn't take my eyes from the barrel of lens, my finger fast trigger against the black skeleton of the camera. I wondered what it would look like cracked open to its upside down mirrors and polished levers, how many screws there were, how many lantern lit cranes might come unfurling out of that cage. I wondered what I would look like if the darkened chambers of my body were unlocked. What streams of light might escape me and reveal about the things I collect and hide? And is there a difference between aperture and wound? Mostly I wondered where my brother keeps getting those Polaroid cameras. And the last poem I'll share in this bit is Providence by Mary Ruefle. In the 5th grade, I made a horse of paper mache and painted it white and named it Aurora. We were all going to the hospital, each one with his little animal to give to the girl who was lying on her deathbed there, whose name I can't recall. A classmate with freckles, perhaps, or such small feet her footsteps never mattered much. I did not want to give her anything. It seemed unfair she got to ride Aurora, whom I made with my own 2 hands and took aside at birth and said, "Go," while I had to walk, perhaps for a very long time. I thought perhaps the animals would all come back together and on one day, but they never did. And so I've had to deal with wild, intractable people all my days and have been led astray in a world of shattered moonlight and beasts and trees where no one ever even curtsies anymore or has an understudy. So I've gone up to the little room in my face. I am making something out of a jar of freckles and a jar of glue. I hated childhood, I hate adulthood, and I love being alive. Thank you.